So hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. Now finally back to do the review, or the initial review, of the Elite Drive 40 disc wheels that I've been riding now for about a month. I've had so many requests asking when is this review happening, what are your thoughts on the wheels, can we have a discount code? And originally I did a preview video which you can find in my video contents, and I said I wouldn't give out the discount code until I've ridden them at least for a month, put some serious kilometers on them and some accelerated testing, so really harsh conditions and stuff, because I was worried they'd be crap, and I am a man of integrity and I don't want to pass off shit to you to waste your money. So let's have a little look at the review. Elite wheels, who are they and why do I have a set? So Elite have been around since 2013 as an OEM business for other brands, making carbon composite wheels for other brands in the carbon wheel capital of the world, which is Xiamen in China. So originally Xiamen Yunnan Composite Material Technology Company Limited. In 2017, they've been focusing on their own kind of top tier brand, I would say. Well, actually they started off with some lower tier kind of carbon wheels that you could find on AliExpress and Taobao and stuff. But this is a really top tier offering. Carbon spokes, custom rim profile to them, custom hub design to them, very lightweight, very stiff, blah blah. And it's worth mentioning that they are very close to the other wheel brands in Xiamen, just down the road from Windspace, I think. So who knows what overlap of staff they may or may not have had in the past and in the future. So that I can only see as a good thing. Competition, pushing the kind of envelope in terms of development and competing against the Western brands. Now they seem to have had a very fast development and kind of go-to-market strategy. That's good and bad, and we'll come to that later. Full disclosure, I was sent these wheels asking for a review, and I was offered a discount code to give to you. And I have a contact person at Elite who I can, WhatsApp whenever anything goes wrong or whatever, which is kind of insightful, good and bad again. But I said no thanks to offering the discount code in the first video, not until I'd tested them, because like I said, they could have been utter shite. So here we go, what do I think of them? A quick summary before we begin. I think this is a rare situation you'll see on this channel of ambivalence. Normally I either really like something or I really hate it, and there are kind of clear-cut reasons to why. But with this wheel set, I'm kind of still undecided. I like it in many ways, but there's some things I'm still a bit wary of. Outstanding value, about 830 quid after using my discount code, if you can get it. And outstanding weight. I've never really ridden a disc brake wheel set this light, 1260 grams, plus or minus 30 grams including ring tape, and I can vouch for that. If you look at my original video, I think they were 1290, so they're bang on the claims. Reasonable stiffness, not the stiffest considering the construction. I actually think that's a good thing, they're not too stiff, and we'll come to that. Aesthetics and machining quality are top notch. If you look at the hub, it's anodized space grey, and they've polished it before anodizing. Now if you've ever done anodized aluminium, it's a lot easier and kind of cheating if you give the surface a quick sandblast or air abrade before anodizing. Now to do that on a polished surface is quite difficult to get a good finish, so top marks. Now this is something I'm a little bit worried about, the company ethos and go-to-market strategy. Do they have ERP, MRP and CRM in place? I hope so, we'll come to that at the end. Testing, so quick rundown of the testing I've been doing in this month, around 12 to 1500 kilometers I think it was. I did a Mallorca trip, very Rafa. A bit of growl hunting on the gravel, and if you don't take the vowels out of gravel, some say it's not even a gravel ride. Apart from that Mallorca trip, which was a week of riding every day and drinking quite a lot of wine, I was riding in Cumbria in the UK, and what I can only describe as sciatic road conditions, so a very good test for these wheels. All weathers, rain, shine. I have a very low FTP at the moment. I'm a 5-second climax kind of guy. I did a spoke tension variance test, and I did a stiffness test, which you'll see more of on this channel. I've basically stiffness tested all the wheels I've tested and ridden now in a massive database, and you'll see a glimpse into that in this video. Construction, quick talk about this. I spoke about this in the preview video at the start. I'll link to that below. Let's start with the rim. That's kind of the easy bit to talk about. It's 40mm deep by 21 by 28. Now, the Western brands like Zip and Envy, blah, 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 are going much wider now on the internal width. I think that's gone a bit crazy. I still like to have quite a narrow front wheel for aerodynamics. Rumour has it, I actually did my PB road bike 10-mile TT using these wheels. And I'm not saying it's because I used the wheels. The conditions that day were really good. Yeah, low air density, low air pressure, and no wind. But yeah, rim profile I think is great for your modern 25, 28mm tyre stance. So I've had a brief peer inside the rim with a torch. I can't see any obvious defects. I mean, if you think that looking inside with an endoscope or boroscope is going to tell you anything about the rim, well, it isn't. You might see a bit of excess resin, you might see a wrinkle here and there, but really, without cutting it or doing some sort of CT scan, you really can't tell anything by putting a camera in it, so don't waste your time. They are super light hubs. This is where the weight's coming down on this wheel set, coming down. Seriously big axle still, well, a reasonably big axle for a lightweight hub. It's a 6803 bearings and a 6903 bearings. So yeah, the idea of those bearings is relatively big still. They're S&S branded bearings, that's the same as the Windspace Hypers. Apparently the hybrid ceramic, now I just can't be doing with this hybrid ceramic thing. Just please, someone, give me a decent quality steel ball bearing, NSK, SKF, something like that. But I have to say, these, I know this kind of unloaded spin test thing is not a fair test whatsoever, but these are probably the freest spinning hubs I've ever had, and obviously I can only vouch for that when they're unloaded and there's no dynamic load on them. They're in a 21-24 format, 21 spokes on the front wheel, 2 cross and then radial on one side. On the rear wheel, the 2 cross both sides, and there's 24 on the rear wheel, so that's 3 more than you get on the Windspace Hypers. They're carbon spokes, so it should make for a really stiff feeling rear wheel. Is that good? I don't know. And both sides, like I said, are tangential, 2 cross on the back, so you've got both sides doing the torque transfer and the braking transfer, whereas on the Windspace, I think they're a radial side. There's a radial side on the back there, so you've only got half of those tangential spokes on the Windspace doing torque transfer and the other half doing the braking transfer. So like on paper, construction is pretty spot on as I would kind of like to see. Hubs lightweighted to the max. You can see the flanges are all pocketed, cut out, crazily light, crazy light. We'll talk about that in a minute. On the face of it, it looks good, but there's a few issues with that. Carbon spokes. Keep talking about the construction for a minute. I love them and I hate them. In general, they make a really stiff wheel, and I've seen that from my stiffness testing on the Fast Sports Von 2 and on the Windspace Hypers that I've tested in the lab. The carbon spokes really do push the stiffness, the lateral stiffness at least, of the wheel. That's great on smooth roads, like in Mallorca on the main roads, on the main climbs, on the main descents, those billiard board smooth roads, absolutely brilliant. You can feel the bike like twitching and feels responsive, absolutely great. But they are horrible on horrible roads. So most of the roads here in the UK are abhorrent with potholes, drain covers, cracks. So you've got a very stiff race bike, an aero bike, something with an integrated seat post like an advanced TCR SL or whatever. There's really no give in the wheel, so all the work gets done by the tyre. And I've gone ad infinitum about this, about using the tyre to do all the suspension. It's too much, because at some point, if you've got stiff bikes, stiff wheels, stiff everything, stiff seat post, you have to drop the pressure of the tyre so much, you just start penalising yourself on rolling resistance. So not always a good thing to have a stiff wheel. The other thing about the carbon spokes is their low inherent stretch can become a problem. They require very high tension, and you know, to coin a phrase, they are highly strung, these wheels, so they don't like low tension. They are easily detensioned by a shock load or a displacement driven input. So a little bit geeky, but bear with me. Let's say you put 120 kilograms on a steel spoke in tension and 120 kilograms on a carbon fiber spoke in tension. You might get a total stretch of the steel spoke, say 2 mil, and a total stretch of the carbon fiber spoke, say 0.8. Now, if you deflect that carbon spoke by 0.8, it's at 0 tension now. Whereas if you deflect the steel spoke by 0.8 mil, you've still got over half the tension you started with. So that's what I'm trying to say. You've got to keep these, because there's so little stretch in the carbon spokes, you've got to keep them under a lot of tension for them to behave. Other weird stuff can happen if that's not the case, in terms of like braking noise and resonance and stuff. Moving on from that, or elaborating on that point, why is tension so important for these highly strung carbon spokes? On this front wheel, you've got 14 spokes on the disc side, but only 7 of those really can do the braking. So it's the 7 spokes that are doing that pulling to the rim, or transferring the increased friction from the tyre to the centre of the wheel, or vice versa, no matter how you want to look at it, it's completely analogous. But 7 of those spokes detension, and 7 of those spokes increase in tension. So the radial side doesn't do anything because those spoke heads can't really react to any torque. So if those other 7 spokes are slightly low in tension to begin with, then detensioning them even more can really cause you issues. And this is an issue with you know, stiff spoke wheels, is that you don't have much give or much kind of torsional spring effect to the brakes. So if there's any kind of displacement driven input where they lose their stretch, they can detension very quickly and you get all sorts of weird noises. And don't forget, the kind of loading on the front wheel and the rear wheel is completely sinusoidal. So when you're sat on the bike, the spokes that are actually doing the work are the spokes at the top of the wheel. So your rider weight is hung off these spokes. These spokes along the bottom of the wheel, when your rider weight is on them and you're rolling along, are detensioned anyway. And if you're braking, the leading spokes go into further detention. So these spokes down the bottom, when you're braking, half of them on the disc side can go into real detention, and you have real issues if you haven't got enough tension in them. I actually kind of noticed that, and it took me a fair few weeks to kind of diagnose this problem. But I had a whirring noise under braking, and it wasn't like contaminated pads or contaminated discs. And I went through the process. I tried so many different disc rotors, I tried different pads, I tried the wheels on different bikes, and I kept having the issue. I still got this weird kind of like harp, this like low frequency harp plucking noise from the spokes when I was using the front brake under heavy torque. And I suspected some of the kind of leading spokes were detensioning too much. And when I was plucking the spokes, like I'll try and put a video in here, when I was plucking the spokes, the frequency of the noise was very similar to the frequency of the noise that I was getting under hard braking. Anyway, so I checked all the spoke tensions to send them to Elite to see their feedbacks. So this is pretty geeky. This is my spoke tension chart for the Elite disc wheels. At the top section here, you've got the fronts. On the bottom section, you've got the rear. You've got disc side on the left and non-disc side on the right. Now we can see on the front wheel, on the disc side particularly, the variance is really quite large, and the standard deviation is quite large on both sides actually. And if you put a 5% tolerance limit, quite a number of the spokes actually fail to fall within those bounds on both sides of the front wheel. And this is on the PEAKTORQUE TM1 spoke meter, so this is kind of an arbitrary number. It's not in kilograms, but it still goes to show you the variance. Some up at 18, some down at the low 15s. I don't know what it is for these particular spokes because I don't have the cross-sectional data or stiffness of these spokes, but that's particularly low and it's quite far away from the mean. It's well out of bounds, that one. So yeah, not the 5% tolerance that I've seen on other YouTubers who are claiming that they're absolutely all bang on. That might be the case, but mine particularly weren't very good in terms of spoke tension variance. Much better story on the rear wheel. A lot more falling within the 5% tolerance. Now basically, if you look at the graph of the rear wheel, the more round the kind of line on the graph, the more uniform the wheel is in terms of spoke tension. So not bothered about the rear wheel, absolutely no problems with that at all. But the front, we can see these shapes are pretty odd. There's a few real outliers. So yeah, I suspect on that front disc side is a couple of those spokes is why I was getting such a weird noise under braking. It only happened under really hard braking, but it was definitely there. So I reported the data to Elite and they took some time to mull it over and they got back to me, but we'll come back to that in a sec. Lateral stiffness test. I've done this, a lot on all the wheels lately. Luckily for me, they're not the stiffest because I find most of the roads that I ride here in the UK are pretty bad, and a stiff wheel just makes the whole bike quite uncomfortable. Surprisingly, they're not that stiff because they have got the carbon spokes, and the carbon spoke count is higher than the wind space on the rear wheel. You may see I've deleted some of the data because there's going to be a video for this coming up very shortly, and it's going to feature all of the wheels that I've tested. The Hyper 50s are some of the stiffest wheels I've actually tested on record. That's down to obviously the carbon spokes and the very, very stiff hub construction, and their preload system and axle and bearing clearances are all taken out to provide a very, very stiff central axis for everything to pivot around. The Elite 40 is a bit of a surprise actually, and not that stiff in the out of plane direction. They should be for the carbon spoke construction and the spoke count and the very wide hub flanges and the high hub flanges. but I think their bearing preload system or their axle stiffness is letting them down. Maybe there's not enough clearance taken out of those bearings to provide a much more rigid interface. All bearings have radial and axial clearances, which translate into angular clearances. And if those haven't been taken out effectively with a good preload system, that is amplified massively when you start pushing on the edge of the rim. As soon as you push here, they show up big time. So maybe that's why these don't appear to be as stiff as the Hypers, even though the construction is almost identical with the carbon spokes and such. I want to talk about redundancies. What is engineering redundancy? And I'm going to say, please, hub manufacturers, before we get into this, please stop doing this. Now, engineering redundancy is basically putting components in place to do the job of something else if that original component fails. So in the realm of a wheel, you could say the spokes act as redundant members for each other. So if one spoke breaks, the one next to it or its neighbours can take up the slack and do the job of that. Some might go into increased tension, some might go into decreased tension, but more or less there is redundancy built into a bike wheel because you have more than one spoke. You have many and they can kind of share the loads. Now a wheel is what we call statically indeterminate. The loads on the spokes do depend on the ones next to it and they also depend on the material of the system. Your hope is if you break a spoke or break 2 or 3 spokes, you may have a massive loss of tension in the other spokes, but the hope is they're enough to keep the structural integrity of the wheel so you can come to a safe stop. Now, normally if we look at a straight pull hub like this DT240, the straight pull spokes go through enclosed holes. So even if they become really, really loose, they're still in that hole. And even though some spokes may have completely detensioned, they won't come out of that hole and you'll still have a wheel, a very floppy wheel, but you still have a wheel. Now the problem with hub designs like this, and I'm not picking on Elite here because we've seen so many of these like on the market for ages, even Mavic have done this, and a lot of the new kind of lightweight hubs are coming with designs like this, is they have lost, I think by accident, the redundancy of the spoke system. And it's because, let's take an example, let's say we pop a spoke on one of these hubs. Let's say that one pops. These might change tension, some might go up, some might go down, fine. Let's say another one snaps. Let's say something goes into the wheel, like a stick or a dog goes into the wheel. Then you've got serious issues because some spokes in the wheel will have completely detensioned. And then what stops those spoke heads coming out? Nothing. Their side entry. That side entry system like depletes the redundancy of the system. And I think in terms of FMEA, it's an absolute howler that these have become commonplace. And I'm not picking on Elite. The Windspace Hypers are the same. There's Mavics out there that are the same. There's Fulcrums out there that are the same. These side entry spokes could have the potential for catastrophic delacing. If you lose enough tension from enough spokes, they'll just pop out. And then your hub doesn't connect to the rim and your face is on the floor. It doesn't happen often. And often, you know, the spoke heads are quite a hard interference fit in their seats, so they don't pop out even if there's no tension on them, but it really is not nice. Let's take a look at this old wheel set I found in my mate's bike room. These caps are there for a reason. It's got a side pull spoke, fine. The machine has come in and machined the pocket from the side, okay. Let's do design for manufacturer. It might be easier to machine the spoke hole from the side or the entry system from the side rather than having holes all the way around it in a tangential fashion, which is quite hard to make, like this DT240 is quite hard to make. But put a cap on it. If just a simple lightweight cap stops this redundancy problem, it keeps the spokes in the hub in the event of complete detensioning. And that is way safer than just having them open. Okay, on this, on the rear wheel, on that side, you've got the cassette butted up. So you can use that as the cap. But on this side, there's nothing. So put enclosed holes on the straight pull hubs, please, or just use some really, really lightweight kind of end caps to cover the spokes. That'd be sweet. Right, coming up to the end, but I want to quickly talk about this, and it's the Elite go-to-market strategy. So this is, on the technical level, I think the wheels are all right. Pretty good, like amazingly lightweight, good to ride. But their strategy confuses me a little bit. Pretty ubiquitous now in YouTube game is if any startup or young company launches a product, wants a review, send it to multiple YouTubers with a discount code hoping for glowing reviews. However, and unfortunately a lot of YouTubers do this, call themselves independent YouTubers, but really they might as well be working at GCM, because they don't have the integrity to like think about actually testing the wheels properly or testing the product properly. And you see it quite a lot. Because let's just make a point, there are multiple iterations of this hub floating around in the market. Trace Velo didn't know which iteration he had when his hub bearings basically fell out and they were rattling around in the hub. Surely in-house testing would have highlighted that. I just can't believe. I just don't know how it happened. So am I testing it? Is it finished? And it's a little bit worrying from a sort of commercial point of view. Take away the technical stuff. Technical stuff is quite good. The commercial side is a little bit worrying. And I'm not really a businessman. This is like basic stuff, but it's been like rapid development, get it to market, send it to YouTube, and it just lacks like a bit of patience. Second of all, the lock ring mod, right? So in my original video, I said, I think they could use a steel shim washer on the lock ring, because for the rear hub, you need to use their lock ring with the external spline type and the bottom bracket tool, fine. But it lacks the steel shim on the lock ring. So as a result of that, you lose quite a lot of the knurling on the disc. Like that's an XTR disc that's the knurling's been damaged by their lock ring because it doesn't have the shim washer, and you lose the knurling on the lock ring. It's not a massive thing. It's still not going to come loose, but it's just not nice, because when you take it on and off, you end up getting quite a lot of aluminium swarf like going into the center of the hub. So I said that in the original review. My contact at Elite sent me a picture from the factory floor, and maybe I'll put it in here, of their modified lock ring with a steel shim washer. They'd literally knocked it up in 2 days and it looked like it was a running change. So that's really impressive. Like, they've taken my feedback and they've started to do it. I'm still trying to figure out if I'm beta testing or I'm testing a finished product where I can offer a discount code to people and I'm safe in the knowledge that they're going to get a good product, because I think the core of what they've made is really good. It up. A very ambitious product by an ambitious company. Low weight, seriously low weight, the lightest disc wheel set I've ever ridden. Really low inertia. The aesthetics and the finish quality, the glossy finish on the rims is flawless. The anodizing on the hubs is flawless, and I think in total they look really cool. The rim profile, I really like it. I think it's bang on the sweet spot for width. 21mm internal, I think that's perfect. 28mm external matches with the tyre really well. Some of the downsides, I think the hub and the axle and the bearing layout doesn't help the stiffness of the wheel. It doesn't live up to the stiffness that is offered by the carbon spokes. I think the carbon spokes and the rim are very, very stiff, but any lack of stiffness you get out of plane, I think, is coming from the bearing setup in the hub. The tension deviation was a bit all over the place, and I've seen other people on YouTube that claim that they're all within 5%. The response from Elite has been, oh, it's been improved since May, which is when I got my wheels, but that's their word. I have to take it. I had this slight whirring noise under braking, and you know, they actually said that can occur. They actually said that to me, that can occur. So they've obviously I've obviously backed up something they knew. And the go-to-market strategy just seems a bit rushed commercially. I'm not going to tell them what to do. I'm not a business consultant, but I think they need to slow down. They've got a lot of things now. They just need to slow down a bit, do a bit more testing in-house, and make sure everyone's getting a finished product. Okay, you know, in manufacturing you do running changes, and that's all I'm asking for. A bit of ambivalence there towards the end. I am going to offer the discount code now if you want to have a punt. I will get a kickback from the discount code if you use it. I'm not asking you to use it. I think I've been very fair in this review, and this channel is all about integrity. So discount is PEAKTORQUE for 15% off. For the money, I think they're worth a punt, but just be wary of the things I said. Thanks for joining for this long-winded technical video. Hope you enjoyed that. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.